Hello again. Like many people, including I suspect a large proportion of those who watch this channel, I breathed a sigh of relief when the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities issued its report a few days ago and concluded what many of us had already known, which is to say that most of the inequalities which we observe in modern society are a product of such things as class, economic inequalities, where you live, how much you earn, that sort of thing, rather than the colour of your skin or your religion. In particular, those who compiled this report were dismissive of such ideas as white privilege and structural racism, which of course are mainstays of critical race theory. Needless to say, some of those whose careers and livelihoods depend upon maintaining friction between different ethnicities were furious at seeing their favourite myths demolished in this way, and the fight back has already begun, with the purpose of discrediting the report and its authors, all but one of whom, by the way, were black or of South Asian origin. A couple of days after the report of the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities was published, a piece of guidance was published for those who work with children under the age of 5. It was prepared by various trade unions and professional bodies in the field of childcare. It bears the catchy title, Birth to 5 Matters, Non-Statutory Guidance for the Early Years Foundation Stage, Guidance by the Sector, for the Sector. You can read it by clicking on the link which I provide in the description to this video and then simply downloading a copy for free. Very interesting reading it makes too. I'm one of those old-fashioned people who believe that babies and toddlers should not have to trouble their heads too much about things like sex. This doesn't mean that I think the subject should be shrouded in secrecy, I hasten to add, but rather that unless a small child asks specific questions about the subject, it can safely be left until they are older. In particular, complicated topics like sex changes and so on do not need to be touched upon when dealing with 2, 3 and 4-year-olds. It is those working with this age group who are the target for this new guidance. I'm looking now at page 25 of this document, which all who work in early years settings will be reading, and I see the following. I hope that nobody will mind if I read a section out loud. Attitudes towards gender and sexual orientation can limit children and create inequality. During the early years, a child's attitudes and dispositions are continually being shaped. Children are influenced by their environments and the adults around them in ways which often affect children's own ideas about themselves. In terms of gender and sexual orientation, young children can develop stereotypical ideas about how they should be and who they should become, which can limit their potential. It is important that practitioners do not shy away from these conversations and instead challenge the effects of prejudice and discrimination. Children's resources and books should avoid stereotypical depictions of people on the basis of gender and sexual orientation. A child may also be part of a family which is LGBTQIA+, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, plus other variations. Early years settings have an opportunity to prevent prejudices from occurring by ensuring that these children and their families feel welcome and valued. In practice, this means that settings should ensure that their environments are welcoming and supportive and actively celebrate the value of diversity. Now, what this means in plain language is that nursery workers are taking on the responsibility of encouraging children to accept as normal the kind of things which some of us feel may not lead to a happy life. It also suggests that very rare conditions should be treated as though they were common and children taught about them. I could hardly disagree more with this perspective. A child may very well come from a home where one or both the parents are asexual, as they put it here. For those unfamiliar with this, being asexual simply means that a person is uninterested in sex or even has a lower interest in sex than is considered normal. Of course, I mean, this might just mean that the father or mother feels no interest in sex or not particularly interested at the moment, which is not uncommon when you have babies or small children to look after. I can't imagine that many parents would discuss this with either their 2-year-old daughter or her nursery teacher, though. Even if they did, it would mean little to a child of that age. What about intersex parents who also rate a mention? These are what we used to call hermaphrodites, and such births affect around 1 in 2,000 people. Most parents who had this condition at birth would have adopted one gender or the other, so nobody would even know about it, really. In the average nursery class, that is to say 25 children or so, the odds are very much against any of the parents being afflicted with this problem. Most of us would rather that the teachers at our child's nursery devoted their time to teaching them to read, rather than worrying about the possible state of our genitals or how often we wanted to have sex. Another problem with this document is that those who wrote it think that we should not be colourblind and treat everybody in the same way. They claim that this approach simply allows the continuation of bias in society, which disadvantages people from black and minoritised groups. Instead of a colour-blind approach to race, more proactive anti-racism is needed. I have incidentally no idea what the word minoritised means. Why can't these people just use ordinary English? I'm bound to say that when people tell me that those working with 2- and 3-year-olds that talking about race is a first step to countering racism, and that it's a mistaken assumption that treating all people in the same way and ignoring differences in race is a sufficient response to racism, I tend anyway to switch off, because I think such an approach is dangerous and wrong-headed. If any of you have kids at a nursery in Britain, this is the shape of things to come. Children of 2, 3 and 4 being taught about all sorts of, shall we say, unorthodox aspects of human sexuality, and also actively encouraged to talk about race and ethnicity. I think it's a terrible idea.